This episode is brought to you by the MJ family of companies. Whatever interests you in the cannabis community can be found at mj.com. Unique and original content updating you on the latest trends in marijuana legalization, businesses and executives that are disrupting the industry, along with recreational entertainment and the latest deals on the brands and products you love. Visit mj.com today. Welcome to the Pot Live Podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G, and I can't believe it. We've already broken through 100 episodes. We want to thank you, the listeners, thousands of you that have sent beautiful comments, beautiful notes to us. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy it. This next year, we're going to bring you the thought leaders, entertainers, trailblazers, CEOs of all the cannabis companies you want to hear from. People that are inventing new products, people that are bringing this cannabis industry to the mainstream. We are going to offer you education, value, and entertainment. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. And we are back on the Pot Live Podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. David Culver. He is Canopy Growth's Vice President of Global Government Relations. Prior to assuming that role with Canopy, David led the U.S. Government and Stakeholder Relations Department, bringing over 20 years of experience from Capitol Hill. We're going to get his thoughts on the overall industry, his background, the monster that is Canopy Growth, and the MORE Act in Congress. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Len. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Excellent, excellent. So why don't you give everyone a little background on who David Culver is, where you came from, how you got hooked up with Canopy, and they can get to know you a little bit, and then I'll hit you with some questions.
Okay, great. So I have a 25 plus year career here in Washington, D.C. I am still based here with my wife and my dog, Harper, here in Northwest Washington. I started on Capitol Hill and worked on the Senate side for many years, and then left the Senate and went to the Distilled Spirits Council, where I served as a VP of Government Affairs for 16 years, roughly, and had a fabulous experience at the Distilled Spirits Council. And left 2.5 years ago to go to Canopy Growth. There were actually quite a few of my friends and colleagues that were in the alcohol industry that started. We were all monitoring the cannabis space, but we started to slowly but surely see folks transition from alcohol into cannabis. And I was kind of an early adopter of that, and there have been quite a few more since, but it's been a fabulous ride at Canopy over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, it sure has. Obviously, Canopy is one of the names that everyone knows, even if you're just a newbie into the industry or into using cannabis or researching cannabis. So that's fantastic. Why don't you tell everyone, I guess, what's going on at Canopy right now? I know you're positioned as, I guess, the leader in Canada and will be, or if you're not already, globally. Tell everyone a little bit about what Canopy Growth does.
Yeah, Lynn, thank you for that. We are obviously the largest global cannabis company. We're based out of Smith Falls, Ontario. We entered the U.S. market 2.5 years ago, and this was after the Farm Bill passed, and we entered into the U.S. the CBD space, as we only operate globally where federally permissible. But we are very excited about all of the products that we have developed in the CBD space. We have quite a few now. You can check out all of them. Your listeners can check all of them out at shopcanopy.com, and we're excited about the future there, even with the regulatory uncertainty that we've unfortunately had to weather for the last 2+ years because the Food and Drug Administration has not provided regulatory guidance on CBD quite yet. But we are working on that, and we're also working on efforts on the Hill to provide that regulatory guidance. So we hope to have more on that later this year, and to provide that certainty that retailers are looking for in the CBD space. But in terms of preparing for full-blown reform in the United States, I think Canopy is positioned for a turnkey entry into the U.S. for a few reasons. First of all, we're sitting on a significant amount of capital still, over $2 billion. I think the number is closer to 2.3. We also have a line of credit that's significant, roughly $750 million. We've established relationships with two significant and excellent operators in the U.S., Acreage Holdings and TerraSend. And also we have infrastructure investment that we began a couple years ago that will prepare us for the U.S. market. So coupled with our innovation that we've got going on internally and our understanding of consumer attitudes, opinions, interests, tastes, I think Canopy is very well positioned for the U.S. to legalize in the near future, which, I'm the government relations guy, so I can say this. I've got, I think, the closest insight into this. I'm very optimistic about the possibilities for reform during this Congress.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into the next line of questioning here that I'll give you, David.
Okay.
So with the new administration, and we don't need to get political on either side of the fence here, of course, but with the new administration, they seem more cannabis friendly. And you just alluded to it. Do you think that legalization would be fast tracked under this administration? Do you see light at the end of that tunnel, or is there going to be a lot more obstacles that everyone, whether you're an investor in a U.S. MSO or a Canadian company, that there are going to be obstacles ahead?
Well, first and foremost, with regard to the administration, there has definitely not been a fast track as it relates to cannabis reform. Now, we know that the President Biden's political rhetoric suggests that he is interested in decriminalizing cannabis at the federal level, and is also interested in more research and potentially moving it to a different schedule, so Op.1 to Schedule 2 or Schedule 3. And part of the reason that the administration hasn't acted on this yet is that they had to completely focus on getting the pandemic under control, which they've done an excellent job of here in the US. And of course, we're helping globally as well. And I'm very proud of our efforts as a country in that regard. They also had to prepare to restart the economy, which those discussions are ongoing right now. You've probably seen the infrastructure package that the White House has been pressing for and Congress is working on right now. This will be the next major initiative that we see on Capitol Hill. So both of those things needed to occur before they could pivot to many other issues, including cannabis. Now, we as an industry have been, patiently waiting our turn, but we are very excited to work with this administration to potentially issue or reissue the Cole-Ogden Memorandum or something similar, and also to work with them on all of the reform efforts that are about to begin, or they have begun on Capitol Hill and will continue in the months to come.
Can you also explain there's everyone hears about the MORE Act. The MORE Act's being introduced in Congress, being reintroduced again after some of the items that you just previously mentioned had to be taken care of as priority. Can you explain to some of our listeners, as our listenership is a mix of business owners and newbies to the industry, like I said earlier, can you just explain what the MORE Act is and how that would help the industry?
Yeah, sure. So the MORE Act is a bill that was introduced previously, and it actually passed the U.S. House of Representatives last December in a bipartisan vote, and we were very proud of the work that the industry did on that. It unfortunately stalled in the Senate prior to the end of the session, but the bill was reintroduced by Chairman Nadler from New York, who heads up the House Judiciary Committee earlier this year. And he's preparing to move this legislation through his committee and then, of course, get it to the House floor for hopefully another successful bipartisan vote later this summer. The bill is important because it, of course, takes cannabis off schedule completely, but it also tackles many of the wrongs of the past. So I think all of your listeners will know that cannabis was used for unfortunate purposes for many, many decades as part of the war on drugs. And I know that my company believes, and many of my colleagues in the industry believe, that before we legalize, we need to make sure that we are righting the wrongs of the past and hopefully doing so in a very forward-looking way. So Chairman Nadler and his colleagues in the House of Representatives, I think, have done a very good job of creating a package that would do just that. I also should mention that there's a package that the Senate is going to be introducing in relatively short order, we think. That's going to be, it's three senators, Senators Booker, who's from New Jersey, Senator Wyden, and Senator Schumer. And all three of them are noteworthy. Senator Booker's been an outspoken leader in cannabis reform for a very long time. Senator Wyden also has been, and he's also chair of the Senate Finance Committee, which would have jurisdiction over a great deal of this cannabis reform measure. And then, of course, Senator Schumer is from New York and also been an advocate for a long time for cannabis reform, but he's the leader of the Senate at the moment, now that the Democrats have control. So we're excited to see what this package looks like. We're also really excited to see the regulatory structure that will be within it. And one of the things that lots of the MSOs, including my company, have been thinking about is what does that federal regulatory structure look like, and how much authority do you give to the states if and when cannabis is legalized, and what exactly does it look like? Is it more similar to alcohol? And I think that's the direction that my company is going at the moment. But we're excited to see that and to be able to work with those leaders on that package. We know that they want this to be a very inclusive opportunity, and by that I mean I believe they're going to put it out for a public comment period for a short period of time before they actually file it officially and begin to gather co-sponsors and try to move it through the committee process. So the excitement around cannabis reform has been since the Georgia special election. It was almost like the industry was dealt the perfect hand politically. So November was great. And then, of course, the special elections in Georgia put the Democrats in control across the board. And we believe that as a result of that, we have this incredible opportunity for reform this Congress, and we plan to take advantage of it. But like I said earlier, we've had to be patient to wait for many of these bills to be introduced and for us to begin to work them. But now is that time. It's all beginning right now.
And can you tell us the status of the Safe Banking Act? I know that for a lot of the MSOs, multi-state operators that we've had on the show, they're very frustrated by the different laws by municipality, city, state that they operate in. And it's almost like you almost can't set up a business plan that's across the board because everything's so different and they can't bank traditionally. The Safe Banking Act may take care of that. Is there any update from your end on that?
Yes. So first of all the folks you've had on your show should be frustrated by this because it is enormously frustrating. And I think that the Safe Banking Act in particular has, as I mentioned earlier, has passed the House of Representatives. It now sits in committee with the Senate, and there's a number of ideas that are being discussed to potentially amend the bill slightly. So some folks are discussing additional safe harbor language as it relates to federal permit holders and financial institutions. There's also some technical correction language that's being floated around in the Senate. But I think the philosophy on the Senate side is that they are going to try to see if they can get a full legalization package done first. And that would be this Booker, Wyden, Schumer package that I referenced earlier. And then if that doesn't succeed, then the fallback position to make sure that we take advantage of something during this opportunity, this Congress, would be something along the lines of safe banking and perhaps even an expanded version of it. This is a really important piece of legislation. My company supports it. The U.S. Cannabis Council supports it. And I guess for your listeners, think about in terms of our advocacy efforts, we've got kind of three parallel tracks that we're advocating for at the moment. One is the MORE Act in the House. Two is the Safe Banking Act, now that it's over in the Senate. And then the three is going to be this Booker, Wyden, Schumer package that will be out later this year.
Is the Booker, Wyden, Schumer package, is that for full legalization nationally? Is it just medically? Is it recreationally, or both?
Yep, full legalization. So it would take it completely off schedule, is my understanding. Now, no one's seen the language on this package yet, but that's the understanding from the rhetoric that we've heard out of those three senators and their staff. And I know the industry is very excited to see it and to work with them to make sure that it's a regulatory model that's appropriate for the cannabis industry.
And Canopy, as you mentioned earlier, has a relationship with Acreage and TerraSand. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe with Acreage, you have some sort of deal that if federal legalization occurs, you can acquire Acreage at X price. Is that the same with TerraSand, or is it just a partnership in the U.S.?
No, we have an ownership stake in TerraSand right now, and that is correct in terms of the option to purchase Acreage holdings. So once we have that permissibility event, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to speculate on exactly what that looks like, but I can tell you that if cannabis is off schedule completely, that would be a permissibility event for us. and that would trigger the acreage agreement and perhaps other things that we're looking at. So that's why when I referenced earlier that I feel like we have a turnkey opportunity in the US, that's a big part of it. And of course, having the capital to back up future acquisitions, et cetera, is going to make us a significant player right off the bat once we see federal reform occur.
If federal reform occurs, will the Canadian companies be allowed to ship to the US, or you must have the presence in the US, or you just don't know until you see the language?
Yeah, we don't know. I get this question all the time. That's not something that we're strategizing or planning on at the moment. It's a future discussion, I think, is the best way to put it. Eventually we may get to the point where we have some sort of international agreements, but for now, that's certainly not top of mind. There's a lot more discussion about interstate commerce in the United States versus cross-border between two individual countries. So we right now know that interstate commerce, of course, is part of the U.S. Constitution, and if we were to completely deschedule cannabis, that it's something that eventually would come for the industry. But there would be, of course, a period of time that we would have to use to develop the regs on the federal level, and really the question is how long is that time going to be before we start to see shipment across state lines? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly a hot topic in the industry and has been for some time.
And for our listeners, and if you're listening to this, you have to have heard of Canopy Growth, and you're probably aware that they have a behemoth behind them in Constellation Brands, which has a huge beverage line. And I know you're introducing or have introduced CBD beverages, and then I would assume eventually when everything's reformed, cannabis beverages. How has Constellation, I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, David, but how has Constellation helped expand the product line of Canopy?
Well, I think we have gained a great deal of insight from the brand successes that Constellation has had. And, this is not in my wheelhouse, of course, but Constellation is very active in the government relations space on their own alcohol issues. And of course, they're monitoring everything that's going on in the cannabis space as well. So they're a great investor, and it's great to have a company that has the regulatory chops, from my perspective, which they do, to help us think about what the cannabis regulatory structure could ultimately look like and how it parallels beverage alcohol, which is obviously where their expertise lies, and how it differs. So they've been a great strategic partner for us, and I think we'll continue to be going forward.
Where can our listeners find out more about Canopy Growth and or the products that they do offer in the States right now, or just learn more about the company?
Yeah, the best way to do it, if you want to learn about our products, you can go to shopcanopy.com. That has the full array of our products available in the United States. And then, of course, you can go to canopygrowth.com, which is our corporate website. And that has really everything under the sun related to the company. You can learn about our leadership and many other projects that we're focused on globally. And if I could take a minute also to make a couple other quick comments for your listeners. The first one being, and probably the most important, that we do have a very unique opportunity this year to see reform on Capitol Hill. And it's the best opportunity we've ever had. So if you are involved in the cannabis industry in any way, shape, or form, if you would like to see federal legalization, I very strongly encourage you to contact your member of Congress. You can do so very easily by going to www.house.gov. You can also figure out who your senators are by going to www.senate.gov. Contact your elected officials and tell them that you want to see reform, because the nation wants to see it, but we need your help. We have a lot of advocates here in Washington, D.C., including myself. They're on the Hill talking to elected officials day in and day out, but we need your voices to be heard on this. I also strongly encourage all of you to contact the White House and let President Biden and Vice President Harris know that this is important to you and that you want to see their administration act. That's kind of a closing line from me.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I think you're right. This is a unique opportunity right now, and if everyone takes a little bit of ownership in it, maybe we can fast track it for the good of everyone involved.
I think that's right, Len. And I just thank everybody in advance that does engage, because I can tell you we need your help. We've got a small army here in DC, but please weigh in and make your voice heard.
All right. And David, before I let you go, one quick hit. You probably already answered it with everything you just described, but give me one thing you're concerned about in the overall industry and one thing that really excites you.
Well, the thing that excites me the most, I'll start with the latter, is the innovation that I'm seeing across the board. I'm privy inside of our company to work with some very talented people to see the innovation that we have as a company. And I'm also seeing it with other MSOs in the United States. There is interest in the cannabis space and in cannabis products from people that I never ever thought would be interested in it. And they're people that are my parents' age, so in their 70s, that are interested in cannabis products because of their aches and pains or sleepless nights, or there's many reasons why they would be. And these are people that grew up with nearly 50 years of the war on drugs. So I'm excited to see that innovation, and I'm excited to see how the market's going to materialize, and really, really pleased with the number of people that are supportive of the industry and excited to try these new products that are coming to market. The area that causes me most concern, to be very frank, is this just happened recently, and that's the president's budget, which had a piece in there, which is the Harris Rider. And I don't want to get into too much of the weeds here, but this basically blocks Washington, D.C. from legalizing and taxing recreational sale of cannabis. And I'm a Washington, D.C. resident. This issue pulls through the roof in Washington. The residents want it. We have a convoluted system now to access cannabis. And the president, I know, is in favor of statehood for Washington. And I find it very strange that he would have included this Harris Rider into his budget, which is in direct conflict to what he's hoping to provide in terms of local control for Washington, D.C.'s elected officials and for statehood for the District of Columbia. So I think we have a lot of spade work here with our advocacy groups in Washington with this White House. We are, like I said earlier, we've been respectful of what they had on their plate, and they've done an excellent job with it. But we are going to really ramp up our efforts with this administration, with President Biden, to make sure that they follow through on their political rhetoric and also understand that this is something that the American public wants. So next time we chat, I hope to have a bit rosier outlook on the administration, but that's an area that's a significant concern for me right now.
Fully understood. And for everyone listening, I want to thank you, David Culver. He is the Vice President of Global Government Relations at Canopy Growth. Thank you for educating and enlightening us on the latest and greatest that's going on with the cannabis industry. And we will see everyone next time on the Pot Live podcast. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Lynn.
Looking for the best deals on all of your favorite CBD products? Check out the #1 rated online shop at cbddeals.net to find dozens of brands offering amazing deals for your wellness needs.